So greetings from Coral Springs, Florida. While I'm down here is a long story, but anyway, it's great to be with you, albeit virtually. And a little mini lecture here on Objective 4 in Chapter 3, which is using the cost of production report to evaluate companies' performance and see how well we're managing costs. So what we can do is we can use the cost of production report that we learned how to prepare earlier for analyzing changes that may have occurred in either the conversion cost or the materials cost between periods. So we can compare one period to the other period. And remember, the cost of production is going to include the cost of material. So we can come up with material costs. And then we're going to combine labor and overhead, and we're going to call that conversion cost. And we can come up with the cost per equivalent unit of conversion cost. And we can compare one period to the next period. So let's take a look at an example here. So at the beginning of July, we have inventory of 5,000 gallons. This is frozen delight, so I think this is the ice cream example that we've been talking about. So the total cost of the beginning inventory is 6,225. Now that beginning inventory as of July 1st represents the cost of production in June, because remember, as I think it was Jair pointed out to us, is that the ending inventory of one period becomes the beginning inventory of the next period. So we've got $6,225 in the beginning inventory. So if we can come up with what the cost of the beginning inventory was per equivalent unit as of July 1st, then we would know what the cost per equivalent unit of materials were and the cost equivalent unit of conversion costs were for June. And then we can compare that to the current cost per equivalent unit in July, and we can see if they're the same or if they've gone up or they've gone down. And sometimes you might find where, say, materials goes up, but conversion cost goes down. Sometimes conversion cost goes down and materials cost goes up. But the fact that there's a change in the cost doesn't tell you why there was a change in the cost, but it tells you there was a change in the cost, and you ought to explore this later on. So when we want to get the cost per equivalent unit, remember we have to take the total cost incurred and divide by the equivalent units. So notice there we had $5,000 worth of direct materials in the beginning inventory. And we know materials are added at the beginning of the process. So if we wanted to get the cost of equivalent unit, we would simply take $5,000 and divide by 5,000 units, and we'd get direct material cost per equivalent unit of one. The conversion costs, however, are a little bit trickier. So we had 1,225 in the beginning inventory there, but that 1,225 was not fully complete with regard to materials. So the equivalent units in there is 5,000 gallons times 70%, which I think comes to be 3,500 equivalent units. So with that background, let's now get the cost per equivalent unit for materials and conversion costs. And if we get the beginning inventory as of July 1st, that will give us the cost per equivalent unit in June. So it's simply direct materials cost per equivalent unit, take the direct materials cost for the period, divide by the equivalent units. So we had 5,000 in beginning inventory divided by 5,000 gallons gives us 1 gallon. And then the conversion cost of the equivalent unit, as we mentioned, is a bit more complicated because those units, although there were 5,000 units, they were only 70% complete. So 5,000 times 70 actually is 3,500. So the cost per equivalent unit for conversion cost is 35 cents a gallon. Now, if we've got those costs for June, then we can compare them to the cost for July. And let's assume the costs for July are given here. So for July, the cost per equivalent unit is 110. Notice for June, the computation that we did was $1. So it went up by 10 cents. And notice the conversion costs for July were 30 cents, and for June, they were 35 cents. So when you look at that and you'd say, what's going on here? Why did materials costs go up? And why did conversion costs go down? I don't know, but this is the beginning of the analysis. Anytime you've got a change in cost, you have to explore it more fully. So what you might find, and I'm just speculating what the answer is here, if the cost per equivalent unit went down with regard to materials, maybe there was a reduction in the cost of the materials, or maybe they were just more efficient in their use of materials. Either way, the costs actually no, it's just the opposite. The cost per equivalent unit actually went up. So so materials probably were more costly, or perhaps they were not as efficient in the use of materials. So materials costs are up, and then with the parentheses going down, the conversion costs are down. So maybe there was less overtime. Maybe the labor is just working more efficiently there. So again, the change in the cost won't tell you what happened, but if there is a change in cost, it tells you better explore it more fully. All right, so let's a little knowledge check here. The cost of production report is often used for analyzing the changes in the conversion and direct materials cost per. So what do we focus on? Do we focus on whole units between periods, equivalent units between periods, partial, I don't know what the hell that is, partial units between period, and completed units between period? Well, we know by process of elimination that we don't use to analyze whole units, because whole units, we know when we think in terms of rows there, that whole units are different than equivalent units, so that's out. We've never really talked about partial units, so I can cross out C. And completed units between periods, well, completed units are going to be a combination of costs from the last period and costs from this period, so that's not going to be the right one. So I would say equivalent units between periods. Not only is that consistent with what we just did, it's the right answer. So we focus on the cost per equivalent unit between periods would be the correct answer. All right. So let's change gears now, and let's go to the practice exercises in your text. And this is on page 125. And let's apply this, what we've just learned here. So if I can find my way out of here. There we go. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we're focusing on the cost of energy, and the cost of energy consumed in producing units in the baking department of the company was 14,875 in June, and was 14,615 in July. So you'll notice there was a slight change in the cost, but that change in cost could reflect in the total cost, that could be as a result of the changes in the actual costs incurred, or it could actually be related to the fact that we produced a different number of equivalent units. And that is indeed the case here. So for July, we produced 42,000, for June rather, 42,500. In July, it was 39,500. So evaluate the change in the cost of energy between the 2 months. So if you want to get the change in the cost of energy between the 2 months, you would take the total cost for the month, cost of electricity, and divide by the equivalent units. So take a minute now, pause the tape, do the computation, and ask yourself what has happened. Has the cost of energy gone up, or the cost of energy got down? So it's a pretty simple calculation to get the cost per equivalent unit. Very similar to what I illustrated to you with the slides. Now try it on your own. So pause the tape here. Don't just jump ahead and look at the answer. Pause the tape, and then after you do the computation, come on back. If I had little background music here, I guess I could sing. So do the computation, and then come on back. Do the computation, and then come on back. Okay, welcome back. So if you want to get the cost of electricity for each month per equivalent unit, you'd simply take the cost of electricity for the month and divide by the equivalent units. So in June, we had 14,875. So the cost of electricity per unit is 35 cents per unit. And in July, although the total costs were actually less, 14,615, you actually had higher equivalent units. So the correct answer here is the energy cost actually increased between June and July. And you'd have to ask yourself, if there was a change in the electricity cost, you'd have to look further to find out why that was the case. All right, so pause here. I'm going to stop sharing, and then we're going to come back, and we've got another objective for this, and also I have a gift for you. So come back for the second of 3 little mini lectures on this topic. See you later. Hasta luego.